All right. Welcome to the study group. Welcome, Chuck.
Thank you, Derek.
Welcome, everyone at home. Today, we got a little bit of a treat, something I'm excited about because we're going to be using some inspiration from one of my heroes, the man Bruce Lee. Chuck did a good job of putting some quotes and slides together, and we're just going to use some of his quotes to inspire some deeper Urantia Book quotes in how it all reflects our perspectives on validation, whether it be internal or external validation, and how that leads to self-respect, true self-respect.
Right, exactly. So this is another one of those instances where the spiritual and the psychological intersect.
Right.
Because issues of self-respect, issues of validation are, essentially psychological in a lot of, and as we experience them, to feel like you're a valid person, to be able to respect yourself as you go through life. There's nothing more important than that. And that a lot of that comes from our relationship with God and our inner life. So that's what Bruce is, I think, talking about here in this first slide.
Yeah, let me bring that up.
Yeah. So I could read this. He says, the poorer we are inwardly, the more we try to enrich ourselves outwardly. I mean, this is a pattern that can be observed, I think, in life. He's an astute observer of human nature. But then he says, in order to realize our true self, we must be willing to live without being dependent upon the opinion of others. Mm. So our true self is a discovery of originality that we're invited to find within ourselves. And I think clearly what he's saying there, if we're too much concerned about what other people are thinking about us, we can get distracted from that inner discovery.
Yeah. It was like you're saying, finding the inner relationship with God is our true self. Mm-hmm. And so everything on the external could perhaps distract us from the engagement, that deep commitment to finding our true self with God.
Yeah, it certainly can, for a lot of reasons. Mm-hmm. Maybe some of them born out of necessity. I mean, we all need to work. We all need to be, have some acceptance of whatever we do to engage with the world. There's nothing, to be taken away from that. But what we bring to that from our inner resources is what he's talking about, to sort of uplift even the most ordinary things we do.
Right.
We can be a son of God in any occupation, as they say.
Yeah, that being a son of God, a creator, that we have this opportunity to maintain authenticity again in each moment. And in doing so, in being authentic, we are now being that creator with God. We have an opportunity to bring in something new. We can tap that well, like we talked about, eternal creativity and refreshment. So that's part of our authentic nature. But us being these mortals in the way that we're developing, it's not always intuitive to do that, to be that way.
Right.
So we're learning that.
So much tied up with our physical nature that it's only natural to think, well, I'm here, I'm in this physical body with all these physical needs, and those are all tied to the outside world, or so it seems, so it feels. Like I have to go to the grocery store to buy food, to put gas in the car to go down the road. These are all physical necessities. And it's easy to forget that there's an invisible presence that can be with us all the time, that puts all of that in a much higher frame. It enables us to reframe our physical experience into more of a higher thought and a higher desire for value.
No, I like that.
Or, our spirit nature can begin to come in to our day-to-day experiences.
Well, being the architect of your own transformation, and then this reframing, you're reframing yourself towards spirit. That's essentially what this soul development is all about. You're reframing your identity.
Exactly.
So that you can now see your place in the cosmos as a creator, a child of the creator and a creator. So in doing that, and the angels are helping us kind of shed that which is not that useful for that, for our spirit development. Right. And then it goes to another quote that Bruce is talking about where he said, discard that which is not useful and keep that which is, So only that which is going to survive, is going to stick
Right.
around.
Yeah, we
And
can
he
actually
really understood that in a way, in his own spirit of truth methodology. I felt like.
Yeah. We almost have an intuitive sense of the truth of that
Mhm.
that enables us even to look forward, look beyond this life. You know, what of value could I take from this life to the next life, assuming that I've got to leave all my physical stuff behind?
Right.
What can I create will have value in the next life? That's more about spirit.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the challenge here, but to have that still be relevant to this life as well. Like, so it uplifts our service, brings more spirit into how we love each other and all of that.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the challenge that we're.
So this notion of being creative, what can we create?
Mhm.
What's an authentic creation that we can do?
Mm-hmm.
So let me read this first slide.
Sure.
It is only the inner life that is truly creative. So kind of like what we're talking about, that's where we meet up with God and start to work things out.
Find our true self.
Yeah. And that's where the well is, to bring newness out.
Exactly.
So that's where creativity is.
Begins.
Yeah. And then this next quote: in the lives of believers, there is a valid originality and spontaneity of expression that forever segregate them from those who have imbibed only the wisdom of the world. They exhibit a stabilization of personality and a tranquility of character, not explained by the laws of physiology, psychology, and sociology. So I love how they say right here that there's this peace, essentially, and originality and creativity and uniqueness that comes forth for an individual who's actually staying loyal to this inner development.
Mm-hmm.
And it actually is not quite quantifiably explainable by the systems of the world of how they record development, things like that.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, this idea that only the inner life is truly creative, that makes sense because it's only in our inner life that we find originality. And that originality is a gift from God. So the fact that we have the spirit presence of the Father within us and we have this personality we've been given, both of those come from the very sources of originality. So that we're given this like gift to start our journey. These two major gifts of originality. And that's cultivated and developed only in the inner life. So if we're going to make the world different, right, the vision for that's something that's never been seen before or done before, meaning that it's original, has to take birth on the inside. It's never going to happen on the outside.
Yeah.
So that's why this is also kind of so important. And these academic disciplines, physiology, psychology, and sociology, those are all external perspectives trying to figure out,
Right.
what's going on with being human, but without really grasping the overriding significance of this completely transcendent dimension of possibility.
Well, we talk about such a light that we have inside us with this dwelling of God within us, that if that's not the best insight we can have of our own self, then having an external authority kind of hypothesize as to what's going on within us.
Right.
Here we have the light of
Putting
God
us under a
within
microscope.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah. Now, don't get me wrong. That's where it's nice to have friends who can help you work things
right.
out.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, for sure. Not that these aren't real issues or real, realms of development and concern. We want to be psychologically healthy. We want to have good society. We want to be strong physically. All that's important. But this tranquility of character they're talking about and this spontaneity of expression only flows from originality.
Yeah. You can't be hindered by some external pressure that, it shackles you if you are hindered by this external pressure.
Or allow yourself to be defined.
Yeah.
Your identity.
Yeah, because then you end up just playing roles, and then it's what role am I at this particular moment?
Mm-hmm.
And you're yoked to too many things.
Right.
But the gospel yoke of truth is so light that you can be original and spontaneous.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing burdening you. It's the burden of truth.
Right. Right. And we discover that it's possible to feel a sense of approval, a sense of validation within that maybe we're not receiving externally. I mean, that happens sometimes where you're like, find yourself alone in what you've discovered. Maybe you've discovered a higher truth or a higher frame or a new way of looking at things and nobody else quite grasps yet. So you're not going to get validation for that.
Yeah, their reasoning will kind of out reason your faith.
Something like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
It kind of takes me to this slide, if I could read it.
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. Do
Where
it.
it says, reason alone can never validate the values and goodness of religious experience.
Mm-hmm.
But it will always remain true. Whosoever wills to do the will of God shall comprehend the validity of spiritual values. So ask and you shall receive. Essentially here is that you're asking for a new framework, a new way to look through the world, to look at the world, and you will be given them. You will, if your intention is to be born new, to see through God's eyes, to do the will of God, then you will gain a capacity to start to comprehend the touch of God, the message of God, his creative influence in your life and identity and everybody else's.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. You open your mind, you open your acceptance of experience, you open your thought process to new spiritually guided interpretations of value. So we see value in new ways.
Well, we remember how we talk about how Jesus being the focal lens, which we can perceive spiritual reality or whatever.
Right.
So
we have
the spirit of truth, as we go and work with God, the spirit of truth will help us.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And let me just read this second part. The happy and effective person is motivated not by fear of wrongdoing, but by love of right doing. And so maybe even if we're externally validated, we might think that this is externally right, or this is expected by the environment. When what we're thinking is right might not be right for the truth for who we are. So as we're still motivated by this love of right doing, because it feels good to be in accordance with what the will of God is, which is real truth. In order to do that, we need our authenticity internally, not assume what is expected from the environment.
Right. We need a real living relationship going on within us, with Jesus, with God, with the Mother Spirit, however we conceive that. Maybe all of the above.
Sure. Go for it.
Ideal. But that this creates an inner state where we're free of fear. Because it's a path of discovery, it's a path of love, it's a path of companionship, comradeship that can extend to our brothers and sisters and associates who are also on this same path of discovery, and that can be a joyful thing and a wonderful thing. And it's motivated by the love of the potential for the growth of that, reality that's born that way, as opposed to being afraid of doing the wrong thing all the time, where you have a rule, maybe more like a rules-based,
laws-based. It's like what Jesus was up against.
Right.
How can you vow to not do something?
Yeah. How can you make a positive out of a negative or something like that? Right. So this all kind of leads into the issue of not just self-respect, but also morality and what that means. Because they're all kind of psychological issues. They're also moral issues. They're spiritual issues. And that's one of the functions of the Spirit of Truth, is to reveal the morality of Jesus, how he made his decisions, and how we can look to him as one who pondered deeply, thought deeply, trying to understand and figure out the best way forward all the time. And that kind of guided him. This relationship with God is what guided that process for him. And we can look to him as an example and learn that we can do the same.
Yeah, the spiritual living.
Yeah. And it's our will to do the will of God that really awakens the comprehension, is what they're saying here. It enables us to comprehend the validity of this approach.
Yeah. And I think in order for that to happen, you have to cleanse away whatever this material sense of validation is still required of you, that you think is required of you. Because if there's a sincere, open, teachable mind, sincerity, keys to the kingdom, to do the will of God, then bam, it'll be there for you.
Yeah.
But there's a
Particularly-
level of honesty that
Yeah.
one needs to have with himself.
Right. We got to be honest in our relationship with God.
Mm-hmm.
And something about that relationship almost makes that happen in spite of ourselves.
Oh yeah, it's got a will of its own.
If we're sincere about taking a few minutes to be with God by ourselves, it changes us. It always does,
Yeah.
for the better. There's just no way it can't.
Yeah. Well, let's read this next one. It's talk
Yeah,
about spiritual living.
Yeah, let's do it. Okay, so here we're going to get more into the self-respect aspect of this. So it says spiritual living, I guess meaning living guided by spiritual values,
Yeah.
mightily increases true self-respect. But self-respect is not self-admiration. Self-respect is always coordinate with the love and service of one's fellows. It is not possible to respect yourself more than you love your neighbor. The one is the measure of the capacity for the other. And I just think that's a really remarkable kind of principle almost
Yeah.
to keep in mind and consider, because I never really thought about that before I read this. So I don't know. How do you think that plays out? I mean, our love for our neighbor, how we can grow that, and through that growth, grow in self-respect at the same time.
Well, it seems to me that it's a bit of, if there's ego gratification, it's still leaning towards material and external validation.
Mm-hmm.
And the more that we kind of get out of that into service, loving service based, that's more of a example of where we are in our spiritual development. So really that is then stepping into spiritual growth, stepping into spiritual transformation. So that's real. And the more love you share there, that shows how much you're really respecting yourself, because you're comfortable enough in your spiritual development that this is how you want to grow. You're making these choices to grow. You see the value in it. You made a moral decision. And now it's part of your everyday, ideally, where then that grows in your service. It's not martyring yourself and debasing oneself.
Yeah, right. That's a good distinction.
Because that's not self-respect. That's the opposite of self-respect. True self-respect, everybody wins.
Right. There's the legitimate satisfaction that is shared almost with God as a companion experience. It's like, get to the end of the day, hey, we did okay today.
Yeah.
And that's sort of that we feeling.
Yeah.
That feeling of witness.
Yeah.
Not witness, but witness.
Witness and witness. Because
both. Yeah.
Bro, I witnessed you do well today,
Yeah, right.
And there's this witness that's going on, this
in that relationship with God.
Yeah.
Right. But growing in love is kind of the challenge always, I think.
Well, it seems kind of like if you're in a bad mood, then it's hard to be loving,
Uh-huh.
And then how do we then grow and be loving, even if our sense of self is not ideal or whatever?
Feeling challenged.
And that's where I feel like where the Urantia Book talks about, or Jesus talks about, your true sense of self is your character. Your real character is found in your defeats. And so even if you're defeated, sometimes that's a good thing, because everything that wasn't real and spiritual just got defeated, and let that go.
Yeah.
But if you're holding on to it, then you're stuck a foot in each world, the spiritual kingdom and the material kingdom. And of course you're going to be in a bad mood.
Yeah, you're going to be all tied up in knots. Paralyzed, paralysis of the will.
Yeah.
He says, Jesus in another place where he talks about that's the danger of loss of self-respect, because it leads to paralysis of the will. You just don't have the confidence. You don't know what to do. You're not settled. You're not grounded firmly in a true sense of a path.
Well, my heart goes out to those who feel like they don't have anything to contribute. They don't sense themselves of what to contribute. And so they're constantly struggling to find what is expected of me from the external environment that I can rearrange in order to feel like I've contributed.
Yeah.
And instead of bringing out that authentic contribution.
Right. I mean, there can be value in a job well done, but if you don't have that inner sense of it being guided by spirit, you're not going to get those higher dimensions of satisfaction or that sense, the sense of superb self-respect. So this is almost like, it'd be fun to almost like test this out. You know, like if I'm feeling down about myself or whatever, just do something loving for somebody. Just do that. Just do it. You know, pull it up somehow.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. In today's day and age, it's easier than it used to be. Man, you can donate so quickly.
Love donations.
Yeah. Well, I got friends all over the world that I know they need help. I wish I could do more. But when I'm feeling myself, I'm like, all right, well, let's see if we can help some of these kids out there.
Yeah.
Or something like
then you begin to feel better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Then you're right.
Let's see this next one. See if Jesus show us the demonstration.
All right. So here we have 3 shorter quotes, all kind of going around these same issues. This is where they say, I love how they say this. It says, what Jesus aimed at in his life appears to have been a superb self-respect. So I really like that because they're not saying what he really aimed at was to like wow everybody. Say, oh man, this guy must be God because he's like, whoa, I'm so intimidated.
Well, can I just kind of like jump in and say that, you know, it was Bruce Lee who like in one of his interviews, he said, look, expressing myself honestly is not an easy thing to do. To honestly express myself from the core.
The true self.
Yeah. And he goes, now, I could jump around and do very fancy kung fu moves, be very flashy and cocky and filled up with bravado, you know? But that's easy. To express yourself honestly, that's a challenge that you should, because it's worth working towards.
Yeah, right. So I think that's part of what they're talking about here.
Yeah, yeah.
So to look, when we think about Jesus, read about Jesus, to think about him in this way, I think is helpful because it's very approachable. You know, he's demonstrating a path that we can follow. I mean, what he always said was follow me. So he wouldn't say follow me if he was trying to take us on a path that we're not capable of. So this idea of achieving this kind of superb self-respect where we can, you know, really move forward with balance and confidence is part of what he offers. So I'll go on and read these next 2. So speaking of Jesus here still, they say, he taught morality not from the nature of man, but from the relation of man to God. Man cannot hope to live up to his highest ideals, but he can be true to his purpose of finding God and becoming more and more like him. So we have this interesting situation going on inside ourselves where we have this divine spirit that's all the time trying to give us picturizations of possibility, however you want to put that. And many times those stimulate ideals that are actually beyond our reach at that moment, right? Right. Yeah. So I'm sure we've all felt that. And if not living up to those ideals in the moment, then you can get like all down on yourself and feel guilty or feel like you're, you know, whatever.
Or not even in the moment.
Feel helpless
like
or
weeks
hopeless.
or years later.
Any and all of the above.
Yeah.
So I love that the book is, you know, aware that we have this issue to deal with, that we have an inspirer of values that projects possibilities beyond what we're actually capable of. But that, you know, that's what inspires us and gives us a sense of direction. But to not have that damage our self-respect, you know, that maybe the failure sometimes to live up to our highest ideals, what they're saying is what we can do always is be true to our purpose of finding God and becoming more and more like him.
Yeah.
So we can always cultivate that relationship.
Well, I like that it gives you an ongoing work project, not like, look, if you don't get perfection right away, you suck.
Yeah, right.
You know, so it's like, look, perfection is not going to happen for you. Throw that out the window. But what you can do is work on growing like God, to be like God, to know and to be like God.
Right.
That's what you can work on.
Right.
So then thank God for, you know, the Urantia book to give us this kind of overview of how we can grow into it with the demonstration of Jesus and how much help we do have.
Exactly. Yeah. And in that second quote, I think is really interesting because in a way that's almost speaking to maybe the moral laws of institutional or traditional religion, perhaps, where man is seen, even in religious context, sometimes in isolation from God. So looking, So this idea that our morality is rooted exclusively in our human nature is like a no-win approach.
Yeah.
Because there's nothing there to lift us out of that.
Well, you'll take on a mob approach where you're very fickle and emotionally and sentimental based, where you can always be triggered and manipulated instead of having the stability and the joy of spirit from this true self-respect that I can be honest in this situation. I don't have to capitulate nor rebel. I have new creativity I can bring out here.
Right. I can be a moral person in this setting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not because I'm humanly perfect, but because I've got this inner inspiration coming from my relationship with God.
Yeah. Even the whole environment might be trying to push you towards immorality, but you have a different curriculum that you're code of conduct that you're holding up to internally. Right. But I will say from my experience, this has got to be based on lived experience, lived faith, because the ideals are bigger than what I can do. So I'm going to show faith and still go for it. Right. You know? Right. And then in that, I'm going to hit failure points. I'm going to fail. And I know that. I know I will fail now. And it's not heartbreaking. It's literally telling me where I'm at in my development. So if you look at it in more of like a quantifiable sense, like exercise or something, you can do so much to one point. Let's say you can lift 50 pounds and that's as much as you can lift. Well, that's your failure point. You know, if you want to get to 100 points, you're going to have to do some work to get there. But if you never pushed it to failure, how would you know how much work you have to do? Right.
Yeah. And those failures and other realms of our lives even can be maybe even be a treasured memory sometime with God, or even while it's happening, we can talk it over and say, look, this is what I'm trying to do. I'm not quite able to handle this. I really screwed up yesterday, whatever it was, but to talk that over, to be open-hearted with God about that and allow the incoming
that's a good point
of uplift and forgiveness and let's work on this together.
Advisement. It's very fatherly to get that support.
Right.
And it shows lived faith that you can approach God, living faith that you can approach God for support and guidance and love. Just asking, just doing that, be like, okay, I hit the wall. I failed a little bit, whatever. Now, where am I going to go now? Who am I going to ask for help? Am I going to go to my drug dealer? Am I going to go to the news person? Am I going to go within? And can I talk it over with God for a moment?
Right. And then everything flows from that. Then you can talk to all those other people.
Yeah. And you might bring something new to the conversation.
But from a stance of confidence.
Yeah.
And knowing that you've got God at your back.
Yeah. Well, let that be known for all of you guys. We all got God. Got a friend.
Yeah.
So tap into that authentic friendship. We'll see what unfolds. Obviously, it's just a developing process for all of us. None of us are perfect, nor will we be in this life. But I think it's important to look back on this life that we lived on this planet and say that I gave it my all. I left it all on the field. And I gave it all to God in a way that something new was forged out of it all. Yeah.
And including a growing relationship with God.
Yeah. That's what
we take with us.
Yeah.
That's what we take with us to the next life.
Right on. All right, Chuck. Great job.
All right. Thanks you, Derek.
Again.
Yeah.
Thanks everyone for watching and we'll see you on the next one.
Yeah. Join us again.